I saw them through the kitchen window. That's the image that stays with me. Not the argument that came later, not the papers signed in a lawyer's office, not even my daughter's face when she finally told me everything she'd been carrying alone for 4 months. Just that window, the late afternoon light coming in sideways, my wife's hand on his arm. The way she laughed, that particular laugh I hadn't heard her use with me in years. My son-in-law's name is Derek Haynes. He's 34 years old, sells commercial real estate in Phoenix, and has a handshake that lasts about 2 seconds too long. I never liked him. I told myself that was just the father-in-law thing, the instinct every man gets when another man takes his daughter away. I told myself I was being unfair. I was not being unfair. My name is Theodore Kowalski, though everyone calls me Teddy. I'm 63 years old. I retired early from civil engineering. 31 years with the county, good pension, decent savings. My wife, Barbara, and I have been married for 38 years. Our daughter, Stephanie. No, wait. I used that name. Her name is Alicia. She's 31, teaches 3rd grade outside Scottsdale, and has her mother's dark eyes and my stubborn streak, which she got twice over. Alicia met Derek at a work function 3 years ago. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Efficient about it, deliberate, like charm was a tool he kept in his back pocket and pulled out when the occasion called for it. Barbara loved him immediately, called him refreshing, said he had energy. I watched him work a room at our Thanksgiving table that first year and thought, this man is selling something. I just didn't know yet what the product was. The window. Let me get back to the window. It was a Tuesday in March. I'd driven over to their house, Alicia and Derek's place in Mesa, a house we'd helped them put a down payment on, $40,000 in 2021, when rates were still low and everyone said real estate was the smart move. I had a box of Alicia's old college things that Barbara had finally cleared out of our garage. No one was supposed to be home. Alicia was at school. Derek was supposed to be at a client meeting downtown. I parked in the driveway, walked around the side of the house because the front gate sticks and I knew the side path, and through the kitchen window, which faces the backyard, I saw Barbara standing at their kitchen island, standing there with Derek. She was supposed to be at her book club. She goes every Tuesday, has gone every Tuesday for 6 years. I have never once questioned where she was on a Tuesday. I stood there long enough to understand what I was seeing. Barbara wasn't just visiting. She wasn't dropping something off. The body language was specific. His hand covered hers on the counter. She leaned toward him. She said something I couldn't hear and he smiled, and it was not the polite smile he gave me at family dinners. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I'm not sure why I didn't cry. I think some part of my brain simply went very quiet. The way a house goes quiet after the power cuts out. That sudden absence of hum you didn't even know was there. Then I drove home, and I didn't say anything. To anyone. That was March 12th. I know the exact date because I wrote it down that night in the small notebook I keep on my nightstand. I'd used that notebook for grocery lists and phone numbers. That night, I started a new kind of list. Here is what you need to know about my daughter before I tell you the rest. Alicia has known something was wrong for longer than I have. She told me this later, much later. And when she said it, I had to sit down. Not because I was surprised, but because of how much it must have cost her to carry that alone. She'd noticed things. Small things at first, her mother texting in another room and closing the screen when Alicia walked in. Derek coming home late on days his calendar showed nothing scheduled, a receipt she found in his jacket when she was taking it to the dry cleaner, a restaurant she'd never been to with him, a Tuesday in February. She didn't confront him. Alicia is smarter than that. She's my daughter. She started documenting. I didn't know any of this in March. In March, I was alone with my notebook, and a rage so cold and controlled it scared me a little. I've never been a man who loses his temper. I've always been the type who gets quiet instead, which Barbara used to call impossible to fight with like it was a complaint. That quietness served me now. I didn't blow up. I didn't confront. I watched. I hired a private investigator, a man named Phil Gorman, out of Tempe, who came recommended through a colleague. He was in his 50s, drove a beige Toyota, charged $160 an hour, and had the energy of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. I told him what I'd seen. He nodded once and said, "How far back do you want to go?" I said, "As far as it goes." Phil was thorough. Over the next 6 weeks, he gave me dates, locations, photographs, a hotel in Chandler, 7 visits over 4 months, texts printed from a recovered backup that Barbara thought she'd deleted. The scope of it was not casual. This was not a moment of weakness or a one-time mistake. This was a relationship, organized, sustained, deliberately hidden, and here's the detail that moved it from devastation into something colder. Derek had been late on the mortgage for 3 months. Our $40,000 was sitting in a house with a loan that was slipping. I found this out through Phil, who, at my request, had run a broader financial background. Derek's business, it turned out, was not doing as well as Derek made it appear. There were debts I hadn't known existed. A second line of credit opened 6 months after the wedding that Alicia had never been told about. The commercial real estate market in Phoenix had softened, and Derek had not softened his lifestyle accordingly. My $40,000 was Derek's cushion. Barbara, whether she knew it fully or not, was Derek's insurance policy. That was the moment I called my attorney. His name is Bobby Wynn, and I've used him for estate planning for 12 years. I told him I needed to talk about restructuring some assets, updating my will, and one other thing. He cleared his afternoon. I want to be precise about what I did next because I don't want it to sound impulsive or vindictive, even though I will admit that somewhere under the practicality there was a deep satisfaction in being the one who moved first. Barbara and I had a joint account, a savings account, 2 CDs, and a brokerage account. We also had the house, free and clear, which I'd paid off in 2019. We had a vacation property in Flagstaff, a small cabin in my name alone, that I'd inherited from my father, and I had a retirement account that was mine individually. Bobby helped me understand what I could move and what I couldn't without creating legal exposure. What I could do, I did. The cabin was already mine. The brokerage account was individual. The CDs were in both names and couldn't be touched without her signature. But I could and did update my beneficiaries, restructure my will entirely, and create a separate account that I moved my direct pension deposits into going forward. I also put my father's 1967 Ford Mustang, which had been sitting in the garage under a tarp for 6 years and which Barbara had always considered part of our assets, into a gift deed to Alicia. I did that on a Friday. Felt good driving it to her school to surprise her. Except she didn't seem surprised. She looked at the car, looked at me, and said, "Dad, we need to talk." We sat in the parking lot of her school for 2 hours. She told me everything she knew. I told her everything I knew. By the time we were done, the sun had dropped behind the buildings and the car was in shadow, and I felt something I had not felt in 6 weeks, which was not relief exactly, but something adjacent to it, the specific feeling of not being alone. She had a folder in her bag. She'd been building it for 4 months. Receipts. Screenshots. A photo taken through a restaurant window that she'd driven by on instinct one Friday night. Dates that matched Phil's dates. Her documentation was better than Phil's, honestly, because she had access I didn't. She lived with the man. She heard things. She noticed things. She had been waiting for the moment to use it. Not sure yet what that moment was. "I didn't know about Mom," she said. Her voice stayed level, but her hands were tight in her lap. "I thought it was someone else. I didn't know it was her. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just put my hand over hers, the way fathers do, the way we do when words don't work." "What do you want to do?" she asked me. I said, "I want to do this right. We made a plan, not out of cruelty. I want to be honest about that, but out of necessity. Because people who operate with this level of deliberateness, who conduct a hidden relationship for months in their own family, who allow a mortgage to slip while running up private credit lines, do not respond to emotional confrontations. They regroup, they deny, they lawyer up, and they manage the narrative. I had already talked to Bobby. Alicia had already talked to her own attorney, a woman named Rosalind Park who specialized in divorce and family law, and who, according to Alicia, had seen everything twice. The plan was simple. We would wait for Derek's sister's wedding, which was scheduled for the first Saturday in May. A large event, extended family, Barbara already confirmed as attending with me as her plus one. 2 weeks before that date, Bobby would complete the restructured estate documents. 1 week before, Alicia would initiate divorce proceedings. The day before the wedding, I would file. The timing mattered because Derek had told Alicia, casually, that he expected to be named in my estate documents. He'd actually said that. Over Christmas dinner, after one glass of wine too many, he had said, gesturing vaguely at the house, "You know, Alicia and I are going to need to think about the future. What happens with all this?" He'd meant it to sound caring. It landed the way he probably intended it to, with Barbara smiling and squeezing his hand. I had looked at my plate and said nothing. I think about that dinner a lot. I think about how long I had been the quiet one, the steady one, the man everyone assumed was too settled in his ways to notice what was happening around him. The week of the wedding I slept fine, which surprised me. Alicia called me every evening, short calls, checking in. The kind of calls we used to have when she was in college. It reminded me of those years when it was just the two of us talking about her day, and I thought about the father I'd tried to be and whether I'd managed it. I think I did all right. May 3rd, a Friday. I filed. I didn't tell Barbara in advance. She found out through her attorney, whom she called in a panic at 9 in the morning after the documents were served. I was already at Bobby's office drinking bad coffee when my phone showed 3 missed calls from her. I didn't answer. Bobby had advised me not to, which took very little convincing. At 10:15, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Derek. I still have the voicemail. 47 seconds. His voice does something I've never heard it do. It cracks in the middle. He says my name twice. He says he can explain. He says whatever I've been told isn't a whole picture. He says he loves Alicia. He says he's sorry. He does not say what he's sorry for specifically. People who are managing a situation rarely do. At 11:30, I drove to Alicia's school. She had taken the day off. A personal day, she'd told the principal. A family matter. I picked her up and we drove to the cabin in Flagstaff, which is now hers by deed and which she has always loved more than anywhere else we've owned. We stopped at a Cracker Barrel outside Camp Verde because that's where we always stopped on drives up north when she was little, and we ordered the same things we always order. She gets the chicken and dumplings. I get the meatloaf, and we sat in a booth with wooden chairs and didn't talk about Derek or Barbara for the length of one full meal. It was the best meal I'd had in months. Alicia's divorce was filed the same day, separate attorney, separate courthouse, no coordination that could be called collusion. Rosalind Park is very good at her job. The wedding that Saturday happened without us. Derek's family was confused, apparently. His mother called Alicia twice. Barbara, I'm told by someone who attended, showed up alone and left early. I spent that Saturday on the cabin porch, watching the ponderosa pines and drinking coffee I didn't have to justify to anyone. There's a particular kind of quiet in Flagstaff in May that I've never found anywhere else. Thin air. The smell of pine resin. The light that comes down flat and clean through the trees. I sat in it for most of the afternoon and I let myself feel what I actually felt, which was sad and tired, and underneath both of those things, clear. Not happy. I want to be accurate. It is not a happy thing to discover that the woman you built a life with was living a second one alongside yours, quietly, for reasons you may never fully understand. It is not satisfying to watch a family fracture. Alicia lost her marriage in the same season she lost the version of her mother she thought she knew. That is not a small thing. I am aware of that. But there is something else I felt on that porch that I think I owe it to myself to name. I felt like myself again. The version of myself that existed before I started making myself smaller to fit into a life that had been quietly arranged around me without my knowledge. The man who inherited a cabin and a Mustang and a stubborn streak, and 31 years of honest work and a daughter who documented everything and waited carefully for the right moment. She is so much like me, it's almost funny. The legal proceedings took 8 months in total. My divorce finalized in December, Alicia's in January. Barbara retained half of our joint assets, as the law required. She did not retain the house, which went on the market in September and sold in 11 days. I used my share to pay off a piece of land in northern Arizona I'd been watching for 3 years. Derek's debts, it turned out, were significant enough that once the divorce proceedings began, they became Alicia's concern too, until Rosalind Park finished with the financial disclosures and the prenuptial agreement Derek had insisted was unnecessary came to matter more than he expected. He is, last I heard, renting a one-bedroom in Tempe and driving a 4-year-old Civic. Barbara moved to her sister's place in Tucson. We have spoken twice since the divorce. Both conversations were short and functional about logistics. She has not apologized. I have not asked her to. Some things have passed the point where an apology changes the shape of them. Alicia is doing well. She's still at her school. Her students made her a card in October, 32 hand-drawn pictures that she sent me photos of, one by one, on a Sunday afternoon, with voice memos describing each one. She laughed while she described them. It was her real laugh, not the performed kind. I hadn't heard that laugh enough in the last couple of years. I hear it more now. The Mustang is running. We took it out last month on a back road east of Payson, windows down, the kind of drive that doesn't have a destination. She drove and I sat in the passenger seat and watched the desert go by and thought that of all the things I had managed to pass on to her, the stubbornness, the notebook habit, the patience for a long game, the thing I was most glad about was this: when it mattered, she chose the truth, even when it would have been easier and kinder to let me go on not knowing. I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the man my daughter trusted enough to fight alongside. That's the version of this I'm going to keep.